Hey everyone. The Epic Times, which I really like a lot, but who wouldn't? These were a bunch of guys who were dissidents in China because they hated the communists and what the communists were doing to their country. So they left and they created the Epic Times. And they were mostly in the beginning anti-communist. Now they do all news, but they're great because they're normally spot on, which is something that you don't see in much news today. So the Epic Times wrote a piece saying Musk says Twitter suppressed free speech under orders from government. Okay. Now, there's a lot of stuff that's being thrown around the internet about the recent data dump that Elon Musk ordered, okay, to bring some trust back to the platform because there's just millions upon millions of people who don't trust Twitter now because, it became a cesspool of censorship, which is one of the most un-American pussy things you could possibly do. And I mean that. You can't win arguments in politics, so you silence the opposition. That's got to be one of the most pansy-ass tactics I've ever seen, but that's what Marxists do. But this piece is one of the most important out there, out of everything that's going out now about this data dump, I believe, where Musk released conversations that were internal to Twitter employees, where they were talking about how Twitter interfered in the 2020 election. And we all know they interfered in the election. We just weren't allowed to say it because the scumbags like the people who worked at Twitter, like Vijaya Gad, who would censor us into oblivion if we did, okay? And most leftists that I've done battle with online, they know damn right well that the other side, that their opponents are being censored, and so they took full advantage of it. They would insult you saying, oh, you have no evidence, knowing that if we present the evidence, that we get censored off the platform. But like I said, this story is an important one. Out of all of it, it's the most important one because it points out that if the government forces a private company to do the government's dirty work, because the law says that the government can't do that themselves, then that private company is the de facto government entity. So in other words, the federal government cannot violate the First Amendment, but a private company can. So the federal government, in this case, got a private company to do the dirty work for them because they couldn't do it. Well, that's wrong, okay? And you think, oh, it's a private company, man. Well, there's precedent behind this, okay? Here's the thing. In Marsh v. Alabama, look it up, the Supreme Court ruled that a corporation built a town for their employees, okay? It was like any other town. It had everything that a town should have, okay, so that the people could live there and work there. And so one day, some pro-life advocates started putting up signs around the town for anti-abortion, okay? And the corporation told them, no, you can't do that, okay? And everybody thought that because it was a privately owned town and it was privately owned by the corporation that they could do and say whatever they wanted about free speech because it wasn't a government entity. Aha! But the Supreme Court ruled that the town was a de facto government. Okay, they in the end ruled that this town, because people lived there, they couldn't get up and move very easily. I mean, you can move, but it takes effort to move, right? Which means that they had governing rules. They had their own legislature, if you will, the city council. They had people that made rules that everybody lived by, stop signs and littering rules. They had their own rules. Okay, so they were a government. All right. And I believe that the same thing will happen today if this current Supreme Court gets a case over First Amendment issues where they argue that a private corporation like Twitter or Facebook or any of the others can suppress free speech because they're private entities. Okay. Especially after we just learned that the government forced these private companies to do their dirty work for them and that they interfered in the 2020 election. And we know now that Twitter especially, but all the social media, but Twitter especially is the new town square. That's where everybody goes to talk, to meet with people and discuss ideas and whatnot. So they're a de facto government when the government is telling the town square to go against free speech. So I believe that this will be a hell of a case if it ever hits the Supreme Court, this Supreme Court, because this Supreme Court seems to be trying to go back to the Constitution, because we veered off that path for decades, at least since 1973. And so now you know why the Biden administration started saying that they were going to look into Elon Musk's other contracts with foreign governments for his other businesses, SpaceX and Tesla and all that, because they didn't want to give up their town square. Okay, they didn't want to give up their censorship. They didn't want to do it, so they wanted to go after him. Okay, so the article from the Epoch Times says, Elon Musk suggested that Twitter was acting under government orders to suppress free speech, with his remarks coming hot on the heels of the release of the trove of documents that lift the lid on some of the social media platforms' censorship machinations around the 2020 presidential election. Quote, Twitter acting by itself to suppress free speech is not a First Amendment violation, but acting under orders from the government to suppress free speech with no judicial review is, Musk said in a tweet late Friday. Folks, he is 100% correct. Okay? That's what I'm telling you. You can't get the government to... The government can't say, well, we know you're a private corporation, so we're going to order you upon pain of a penalty of some sort, because the government isn't real nice. Hey, will you do this for us? Yeah, so that makes them a de facto government. Musk's remarks came in the context of Friday's unveiling of a series of internal Twitter communications that give insight into steps taken by staff at the social media platform around suppressing the New York Post's explosive Hunter Biden laptop story. Now, you remember there were 50 former intelligence officers that came out and said, it's Russian disinformation. Now, how much you want to bet it was the Biden campaign? And it was Nancy Pelosi and Chuck Schumer and all the rest of those sons of bitches that got those intel guys to say that, because they had absolutely no evidence whatsoever. They presented none to say that it was Russian disinformation. They didn't see that what was on the laptop. So how the hell would they know if it was it sounds like Russian disinformation. Really? How would you know what Russian disinformation is? You guys missed everything. Let's just go down a short list of things that the CIA either screwed up or completely missed, okay? So they missed the Pearl Harbor attack. They were around OSS into CIA. They missed the Bay of Pigs invasion. They missed the Tet Offensive. They missed the Yom Kippur War, the 6-Day War. These clowns, they missed the Iranian Revolution. They didn't know about it. Okay? Our intel community missed the Soviet invasion of Afghanistan. Our intelligence community, our CIA, had just come out with a report saying that the Soviet Union would kick our asses in the very near future, only days before the Soviet Union collapsed. Okay? They dropped the ball on the Indian nuclear test. Don't forget 9/11, folks. Where the hell was the CIA on 9/11? In the Iraq War, prior to it, they told us there were WMDs. That was the intel that they and every other intelligence community in the world was used by George W. Bush, okay? But then they came out later on and said, we never told you that. Sure they did. We know they did. We saw that they did. So I don't want to hear, that 50 intel guys, all Democrats, by the way, or people who hated Trump, okay, came out and said it was Russian disinformation. They didn't know what they were talking about, but they said it anyway. And I want to find out, was the Biden administration or the Biden campaign, were they behind that? So I think this data dump has opened up a whole new can of worms. And it's just in time for in January when the Republicans take over the House. Now, whether the rhinos allow investigations into this or not, remains to be seen. But I think other people will do their own investigations, and we're going to hear a lot more about this. So that's it. Thanks a lot. Thanks for spending time with me here, and I'll see you in the next one.